Welcome to LifePoint TV. This is Pastor Dell Phillips, your host for LifePoint, your path to real life. We have initiated a new study and we are focusing our attention on uh, grace, God's work, not the work of man. I want you to uh, go with me to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. That's where we left off, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. And I want to begin to refresh our thinking about this passage. It says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, not of yourselves, it is the gift of God." We initiated this broadcast with opening up with what Paul teaches us in Romans chapter 5 about our justification, the fact that we now have access to the grace of God. Why? Because God has aligned us, justified us. How? Through his work. We have faith, listen, we have faith in what God has done to align us, to bring us into right relationship with him. When he brings us into right relationship, that's what justification means, to align, to rightly align something. God brings us into alignment with him. You should stay there. Paul says in Romans chapter 5, in that passage chapter 5, verse 1 through 2, that we are standing in that place of grace. You should stay there. That's a good place for you and I to be. We should remain in grace. Why? Because now, as we look at Paul, as he continues to teach us about the concept of grace, he says, "For by grace are you saved through faith." It is the gift of God. We are not saved on our own or by our own ability. Grace dismisses our inability and replaces what we are unable to do with what God is able to do. So where we left off last week was defining the Hebraic concept of the word grace. The word grace comes from a Hebrew word, kain, or Cain, Khane. The phonetics are the spelling in English, and it means this is how the word grace is described. When someone bends over or stoops down to an inferior in order to supply them with what they need. Oh, I like that. That's powerful. When someone bends over, stoops down in kindness to an inferior, one who is higher, bends over, stoops down to minister, to bring kindness to an inferior, one who's lower, in order to meet their needs. That's what God does through the power of grace. God is stooping down, bending over to you and I who are inferior to him, to raise us up, to align us in right relationship, put us in right standing, to justify us, as we learned in Romans chapter 5, and we stand in his grace. And I'm telling you and encouraging you to stay right there. Man, it is overwhelming to me. And this is personal, not just pointing my finger in the direction of where you are viewing this broadcast. This is personal. How we wrestle and struggle and squirm to move out of that place where God has aligned us so we can stand on our own. And it took the power of God's grace to muscle us over and wrestle us out of the hand of sin, iniquity, that which had separated us and divided us and created a conflict between man and God. And God now aligns us, takes us, snatches us out of the hand of sin / death, and puts us in right order with him in his grace, And now we stand in his grace and we wrestle, squirm. I want to get out and I want to stand on my own. I want to self-justify. I want to be able to prove to God that I am capable of doing this on my own. And God said, really? You couldn't get yourself saved. What makes you think that you can walk and live in salvation on your own? Grace is God's work in man's life, doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Grace is God bending over, stooping down to you and I who are inferior and providing us, giving us kindness, ministering to us in the area where we need him the most. And we wrestle trying to stand on our own. I'm here to tell you, you should stay right there in that place of grace. I want to encourage you, stay on that path, the grace path that leads to real life. Until our next broadcast.